If you can play Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, I'll marry you on the spot." Harper Quinn didn't look up from her phone when she said it. Her heels echoed across the marble floor of Lyra Records' corporate lobby, the only sound aside from the faint whir of a floor buffer in the distance. The janitor, broad-shouldered, quiet late 30s, paused his cleaning, still crouched in front of the grand piano that sat like a relic at the heart of the building's glass and steel atrium. He was polishing its legs with a care that made it seem like a sacred artifact rather than office decor. She finally glanced up. "You hear me?" The man looked at her then. His eyes were a strange shade between gray and green, clear, unreadable. He stood slowly, one hand still resting lightly on the piano bench. "I heard you," he said, voice calm, "but that's not a piece you play because someone dares you." Harper arched an eyebrow. "So, you do know the piece?" He didn't answer, just returned to his work, folding the cloth in his palm with the same precision as if he were folding a flag. Harper studied him a moment longer, then gave a soft scoff and turned on her heel. Didn't think so. She didn't know why she said it. Maybe it was the silence of another late night in the building she ran but didn't belong to. Maybe it was the absurd romance of the polished piano gleaming under pendant lights no one ever noticed. Or maybe it was the way the janitor had looked at the piano, not as an object to be cleaned, but as something remembered. Either way, the moment was over. She stepped into the elevator, swiped her badge, and disappeared into the belly of her kingdom. By the time Elliot Reed finished wiping the last fingerprint from the black lacquered lid, the building had gone completely still. He looked around once, then slid onto the bench. His fingers hovered over the keys, not pressing, just resting as if trying to recall where they'd last belonged. He didn't play. He just sat there, eyes closed, listening to the silence. A silence shaped like memories he hadn't touched in years. The next morning, Harper's assistant handed her a report and a coffee and launched into a rundown of the day's agenda. But Harper wasn't listening. Her eyes were drawn across the glass to the piano in the lobby where a faint smudge on the lid, impossibly faint, caught the light. She remembered his hand resting there, the stillness in his eyes. "Jennifer," she said, interrupting her assistant mid-sentence. "Who's the overnight janitor?" Jennifer blinked. Elliot Reed. Works third shift. Started 6 months ago. Why?" Harper didn't answer. She just stared at the piano a second longer, then turned to her schedule like nothing had happened. That night, Harper returned to her office long after the others had gone. The building slept. She didn't. Deadlines, investor calls, an upcoming gala featuring a string quartet she didn't even care for. She shut her laptop and headed downstairs. Something about the silence pulled her toward the lobby. The lights were dimmed, casting the piano in a soft halo. And there he was, Elliot, kneeling again, polishing the brass pedals. She cleared her throat. "I owe you an apology." He didn't flinch, didn't stop moving. For what? For being condescending, she said, crossing her arms. It was a stupid thing to say. That Chopin comment. This time he did pause. Most people wouldn't remember. "I remember everything," Harper replied. "That's how I stay ahead." Elliot stood. "Then you should also remember Chopin isn't a party trick. He's—" Prayer set to music. She tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. "You speak like someone who's played him." He gave a small, cryptic smile. "I've played a lot of things. Doesn't mean I still do. Why not? Because some things stop belonging to you when you stop needing them to survive." Harper was quiet. Then, "That sounds like something a man says when he's lost more than he expected to." Elliot looked at her long and hard. Then he nodded once. "Good night, Miss Quinn." He turned to leave. "Wait." He stopped. She walked to the piano, ran her hand along its edge. "Do me a favor. Next time I say something reckless, call me out. Do you say reckless things often?" "Only when I feel something I don't understand." Elliot's gaze softened. "You understood more than you think. You just didn't know how to say it." Upstairs, the security cameras quietly recorded the empty lobby after both had gone, but no one noticed the slight shift in energy around the piano. The next morning, the cleaning crew found a folded paper resting gently on the music stand. No name, just a fragment of music. 4 bars, handwritten, half a melody, a beginning, like someone had just remembered how. The applause was supposed to feel like triumph. Instead, it was a dull roar in Harper Quinn's ears, echoing like a storm trapped inside a cathedral. She stood behind the heavy velvet curtain, back pressed against the cool concrete wall, one hand still trembling. She had made it through 3.5 minutes of Bach barely. The notes had bled together. Her tempo had faltered twice. Her left hand had locked at one point, paralyzed by a memory she couldn't name. And though the crowd clapped politely, she could feel their confusion. Why is she up there? Was that intentional? Is she… Okay. She wasn't. Harper had not touched a piano in 18 years. The gala was supposed to feature a world-class pianist from the Berlin Philharmonic, but a car accident that afternoon had sent the entire events team into a meltdown. With no time to fly and a replacement, the board had asked Harper half-jokingly if she could still play a little something for the intro segment. She had smiled tightly. Of course. And then she'd locked herself in a practice room for 4 hours trying to remember how her fingers once moved without fear. She should have refused. But pride is a strange god, it lets you burn rather than bow. Backstage. Harper exhaled slowly and unclenched her hands. The last chord still throbbed in her palms. She didn't want pity. She wanted air. She slipped out the side exit of the venue, the chill of the New York night slicing through her dress like a blade. The staff parking lot was mostly empty except for the low hum of a few idling vans. And then music. Soft, clear, fragile as moonlight on water. A piano. The same piece. But this time played the way it was meant to be. Each note a breath, each pause a heartbeat. She followed it. Behind the loading dock in a storage bay barely lit by a flickering bulb sat a weathered upright piano, likely dragged out for ambiance forgotten in the chaos. And, added playing with eyes half closed and posture that spoke of old discipline, was Elliot Reed. He didn't notice her at first. His fingers danced across the keys with the precision of someone who didn't need to think, only feel. Harper stood there in stunned silence, the chill forgotten. It wasn't just that he was good, it was that he played like he'd lived inside the song, like the music knew him, not the other way around. Finally, he glanced up and saw her. The last chord faded into the shadows. "I thought you left," he said softly. "I did." Her voice was barely a whisper. But then, "You played." Elliot stood slowly, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeves. "Didn't think anyone would hear. That was Bach." He nodded. "Your choice tonight. You rushed the transitions in the middle. Hands got stiff. Too much tension in the shoulders." Harper crossed her arms. "You were listening. You were shouting, 'Miss Quinn,' not playing." The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. She took a breath. "How did you know the piece?" He didn't answer right away. "Then I played it once. For someone who mattered. A long time ago. A beat." Harper stepped forward, her voice quieter now. "You're not just a janitor, are you? No more than you're just a CEO," he replied. "We all hide in uniforms." The silence between them stretched. It wasn't awkward, just dense like a note sustained too long, waiting for the resolve. Then Harper asked the question she'd been circling since the night before. "Why are you here, doing this? Cleaning floors, polishing pianos, hiding backstage?" Elliot didn't look at her when he answered. "Because life is a thief. It takes what you love and leaves you with what you need to survive. And sometimes, survival looks like pushing a mop." Harper's throat tightened. "That's a poetic way of saying you gave up." He turned then, not angry but steady. "I didn't give up. I gave everything. There's a difference." And in that moment, Harper saw it, not just the man who could play, but the man who had stopped. Not because he lacked talent, not because no one believed in him, but because something or someone had mattered more. She swallowed hard. "You should have been on that stage tonight." Elliot shook his head. "It wasn't my place." "Then where is your place?" she asked, stepping closer. "Because clearly it's not behind a cart of cleaning supplies." He looked at her, a flicker of something behind his eyes, grief, maybe. Or something older. "My place," he said slowly, "is beside the person who needs me most." And with that, he stepped away from the piano as if the song were finished. Harper stood frozen, the night pressing in. She thought of all the concerts she'd attended, all the prodigies her label had signed, all those brilliant performers chasing fame like it was oxygen. But this man had played a song she couldn't forget. Then walked away like it was nothing. Or maybe like it was everything. That night back in her penthouse, Harper couldn't sleep. She found herself scrolling through databases, press clippings, old concert programs. No trace, no name, nothing that connected a janitor named Elliot Reed to any musical past. Except one blurry photo. A young man, 20-something, playing piano at a chamber concert in Montreal. The face was younger, But the eyes. Same strange shade. Same stillness. Caption E. Read finalist St. George Classical Showcase 2005. Beneath it in small print considered a rising star. Disappeared from the circuit in 2009. Harper leaned back, heart pounding. Elliot Reed wasn't just a janitor. He was a fallen star, one who'd let the world forget he ever burned. And somehow, she didn't want to forget him at all. "Tell me the truth," Harper said. Elliot didn't even blink. He just looked up from the stainless steel sink he was scrubbing in the executive break room. "About what? About who you are?" She stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind her. "Because I spent the last 3 hours digging through every concert archive from here to Montreal, and you're not just a guy who knows Bach. You were E. Reed. Finalist, rising star, a name people thought would become legend." Elliot rinsed the rag in silence. "You disappeared in 2009. She continued, voice low, steady. "No scandals, no farewell tour, no interviews. You just vanished. And now you're pushing a cart down the same hallways where people who couldn't hold a candle to your playing get standing ovations." He placed the rag down gently, as if it were porcelain. "You've done your homework." "I'm thorough," she said. "I don't like mysteries in my building." Elliot dried his hands. "I'm not a mystery, Miss Quinn. I'm just a man doing his job." "No," Harper said, stepping closer. "You're a man hiding, and I want to know why." There was a long pause. Then he sighed and leaned back against the counter, arms crossed loosely. "You ever lose everything that made sense to you in one moment?" Harper said nothing. "You train your whole life to master something." Elliot continued, eyes far away. "You breathe, it sleep, it bleed for it. Then one day, it stops being enough. Not because you're not good, but because life hands you a new sheet of music and says, 'Play this instead.' And it's written in a key you've never seen." "What was the moment?" she asked. He hesitated, then with quiet finality. "My wife. Cancer. She passed in the spring of 2009. Our daughter was 2. Harper's heart caught. I couldn't tour with a toddler, couldn't teach master classes and still be there when she woke up coughing in the night. I had to choose." "And you chose her," she whispered, without blinking. Another silence, but this one was different, softer, reverent. Harper swallowed. "I don't know if I'd be strong enough to do that. You'd be surprised what you're capable of when someone small needs you to survive." She sat on the edge of the counter across from him. "So, you gave it all up." "I gave up the stage," Elliot said. "Not the music." "Where is it now?" she asked. "The music." His eyes flicked to her, then away. "Mostly quiet. Sometimes it wakes up when she laughs, or when she sleeps. But I don't play anymore. Why not? Because when I sit at the keys now, I hear everything I've lost." Harper looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "You're wrong." Elliot arched an eyebrow. "You don't hear what you've lost," she said. "You hear who you've loved. That's not the same thing." The room felt heavy, sacred, like they were standing in the middle of a cathedral neither had meant to enter. Elliot studied her. "How do you know that?" Harper's voice wavered. "Because I stopped playing too, a long time ago, for different reasons. But the silence." "It's familiar." He said nothing. "I was 12, she said, eyes fixed on the floor. "My father was a composer, brilliant but broken. Music was his god and his curse. He'd spend days in a manic trance, then come home and destroy everything he wrote. One night, I messed up a note. He said, 'Don't touch that piano again until you're worth hearing.' I never played after that." Elliot's jaw tightened. "You still believe him?" Harper looked up. "I don't know, but I still hear him." Elliot walked to the sink, rinsed his hands again, then turned off the water with a soft click. "You ever play for someone who doesn't know who you are?" he asked. "No." "Then maybe that's what we're both missing." The next night, Harper returned to the lobby well past midnight. The piano gleamed under low pendant lights untouched. She sat, let her hands hover above the keys. Then, softly, cautiously, she began to play. The first notes were halting, like someone testing language after years of silence, but she kept going. Her hands remembered more than her mind did. Then, a second pair of hands joined hers, not intrusive, not showy, just there, lifting the melody where she dropped it, building a harmony that wrapped around her like a second chance. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. Elliot sat beside her, expression unreadable, playing as if the past wasn't chasing either of them. They played together a patchwork of broken rhythms and half-remembered scales. And yet, somehow, it was beautiful. When they finished, neither spoke for a long time. Then, Elliot said, "Your left hand still tenses when you're uncertain." Harper exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "So does my heart." He looked at her. "The two are usually connected." She turned to face him. "What was that piece we just played? I don't know," he said. "We made it up." Harper smiled, not the practiced boardroom smile, but something real. Tired. Warm. "Maybe we should finish it someday." Elliot nodded. "Maybe we already started." Later, as Harper rode the elevator alone to the top floor, she realized something she hadn't felt in a very, very long time. Hope. It didn't feel loud. Or grand. Just like a key gently turning inside a door she hadn't touched in years. And somewhere beneath it all, buried deep in the echoes of Chopin and Bach and her father's voice, she heard a different melody now. One that didn't belong to loss. One that might belong to her. The first thing Harper noticed was that his apartment didn't look like it belonged to a janitor. It wasn't expensive or large or particularly stylish, but it was lived in warmly. Every surface was clean. A worn couch sat beneath a wall covered in framed sheet music, and a second-hand bookshelf sagged with classical scores and children's books. The faint scent of cinnamon lingered in the air, and somewhere in the back a tea kettle was beginning to whistle. But the centerpiece of the small living room was a piano, upright, modest, but well cared for, tucked beneath a window where the sunlight fell like a curtain of gold. Harper hadn't meant to come inside. She'd just walked Elliot home after an impromptu dinner, burgers, nothing fancy. But Luna had tugged on her hand and said, "Come see my music wall," and before Harper could say no, she was in. Now she stood frozen, her eyes locked on the piano. "That's where it started," Elliot said quietly, stepping past her with 2 mugs of tea. Luna took her first steps toward that bench. "I was practicing Chopin." She let go of the coffee table and walked straight to the music. Luna beamed proudly. I touched the low C. It was magic. Harper smiled, then took a sip of tea. "It smells like memories in here." Elliot sat across from her. "That's what grief is most days, memory with sharp edges." Luna skipped over, holding something in both hands, a thick folder with frayed edges and music paper peeking out. "Daddy's songs," she announced. "Well, half of them. He says most are sleeping." Harper raised an eyebrow. "Sleeping." Elliot rubbed the back of his neck. "Unfinished. Ideas I never chased down. Melodies I was too tired or too scared to complete." Harper took the folder gently. The first page was a delicate melody handwritten in pencil notes spiraling across the staff like whispers. It ended abruptly, mid-phrase. "You wrote this," he nodded. "A lifetime ago. It's beautiful." She traced the final measure with her fingertip. "But it stops too soon." Elliot shrugged. "So did a lot of things. That silence again. The kind that says more than anyone dares to." Then Luna said softly, "Daddy used to play at night when he thought I was asleep. I always listened." Harper turned to her. "Do you play too?" "I try," Luna said proudly, "but my fingers are short." "They'll grow," Elliot said, "and they already know more than most people's hearts." Later, after Luna had gone to bed, humming to herself as she drew pictures of knights and queens and pianos with wings, Harper found herself at the bench. She sat beside Elliot in the half-light, the score still open in front of them. "Why this one?" she asked. "Why not finish it?" He was quiet for a long time. "Because I wrote it for someone I never got to say goodbye to," he finally said, and finishing it felt final, like she'd really be gone. Harper didn't ask who. She didn't need to. She placed her hand on the keys, tentative, careful. "I think," she said slowly, "some songs aren't meant to be endings. They're meant to be open doors." He looked at her. "You think I should finish it?" "No," she replied. "I think we should. A breath, a pause, a spark." Then, like leaves caught in the same wind, their hands moved together, filling in the blank bars, testing variations, building layer upon layer of sound, not perfectly but truthfully. It wasn't about skill anymore. It was about presence. At one point, Elliot stopped listening. "You modulated early." "I know," she smiled. "It felt right." He shook his head with mock disapproval. "You're breaking the rules." "Rules never raised a child alone," she said softly. "Rules didn't hold you together when your world fell apart." Elliot looked at her. "No. But music did." The clock struck midnight before either of them noticed. Elliot stood stretching. Luna's appointments are early tomorrow. Harper nodded, rising. Thank you for all of this. He walked her to the door, but just before she stepped out, she turned. I've been thinking about what you said, about survival and sacrifice, and I realized something. What's that? That you didn't just give something up, she said. You gave yourself away piece by piece to build something bigger than you. He didn't speak. You're not unfinished, Elliot. You're just waiting for the right person to turn the page. He swallowed hard. Maybe it's time. She stepped into the hallway. Good night, Mr. Reed. He smiled faintly. Good night, Miss Quinn. And as the door closed between them, Harper realized she hadn't been this afraid or this alive in years. Not because of who he was, but because of who she was with him. That night in her penthouse, Harper sat alone at her own piano, untouched for over a decade. She opened the lid, placed her hands on the keys, and finished the phrase he'd started. The next time Harper visited, it wasn't planned. She told herself she was just dropping by after a client meeting uptown. But the truth was, the silence in her penthouse had begun to feel deafening again, and she was starting to realize something. Sometimes it wasn't music you missed. Sometimes it was the people who made you want to listen. When Elliot opened the door, Luna barreled into Harper with an enthusiastic hug, nearly knocking her purse sideways. You came back, the girl beamed. I was practicing the new piece. I gave it a title. Harper crouched to her level. Yeah. What is it? Luna held up a sheet of paper with bold, colorful letters, The Song That Never Sleeps. Elliot raised an amused eyebrow from behind her. Her naming skills are dramatic. Harper smiled. No, she understands something most composers forget, that real music doesn't end when the notes stop. Luna twirled, giggling. I knew you'd get it. They gathered around the piano again, this time in daylight. Harper noticed Luna sitting with surprising posture, fingers resting lightly on the keys. Elliot sat beside her, adjusting her wrist with the gentleness of a craftsman. Ready? He asked. Luna nodded, starting with the left hand. The pattern's offbeat? I hear it in threes, not fours. Harper tilted her head. You hear that Luna gave a modest shrug. It's just there, if you listen with your eyes closed. Elliot grinned. She's got what the teachers used to call an absolute ear. Knows when a note is even a quarter tone sharp. Harper crossed her arms, watching the little girl play a broken-down arpeggio like she was unlocking a treasure map. You didn't tell me she was gifted, Harper said. She's not a trophy, Elliot replied. She's just Luna. Harper met his eyes. That's the most beautiful thing a parent can say. After practice, Luna curled up on the sofa with a sketch pad. She drew her usual whimsical figures pianos with wings music notes shaped like hearts, a woman with flowing red hair labeled Queen Harper. Harper laughed when she saw it. I've never been royalty before. You wear high heels like a Queen, Luna said simply. Elliot walked in with hot chocolate and set it down with a smile. She only calls people queen when they make her feel safe. Harper blinked. That's a high compliment. She doesn't say it often. Elliot's tone was quiet. Luna looked up. I used to call Mommy that too. The room fell silent, not in awkwardness but in reverence. Harper sat beside her. Do you remember her? Little things, Luna whispered. She smelled like orange tea, and her voice sounded like lullabies. Sometimes, when Daddy plays slow songs, I think she's in the room. Harper reached out, gently brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead. She sounds like someone who left a lot of love behind. She did, Elliot said from the doorway. His voice wasn't broken, but there was an ache in it. A hollow that had learned to echo gently instead of scream. Later, when Luna went to her room for a nap, Harper wandered to the bookshelf. She ran her fingers across worn bindings, old programs, photos of Elliot and Luna at parks and hospital waiting rooms, and birthday cakes with uneven candles. But what caught her attention was a faded journal with a red ribbon tucked inside. She opened it carefully and found pages of music, but also words, lyrics, handwritten, raw, unfinished, notes in the margins, scribbles and revisions, a phrase repeated again and again. What we lose becomes what we love deeper. She turned. You wrote lyrics too? Elliot, pouring tea, nodded, before the silence got too loud. She held up the book. You should finish these. I wrote those when Sarah was in the hospital, he said, not meeting her eyes. I couldn't fix her body, but I tried to give her a lullaby strong enough to stay behind. Harper's throat tightened. Did you ever sing it to Luna once? And she cried. She said it sounded like goodbye. Harper sat beside him. Maybe now. It could sound like home instead. There was a pause. Then, "She's getting worse," Elliot said. Harper stilled. "More attacks lately. Shorter breath. Her color fades faster. Her doctors are talking about options, but you can't afford them. I can't afford to hope, Harper. That's the cost that scares me most." She looked at him, and for once her business instincts didn't leap to solutions. She didn't offer a check or a referral or a private jet. She said, "Then let me sit with you, in the middle of that fear. You shouldn't have to carry this alone." Elliot's jaw clenched. "I'm not used to people standing still when things get hard." "Then I'll be the first," she whispered. That night, as Harper was about to leave, Luna stirred from her nap. Harper knelt beside her, whispering, "Do you want me to tuck you back in?" Luna nodded, sleepy-eyed. As Harper pulled the blanket over her, Luna reached for her hand and said, "Can you play that half-finished song again tomorrow, the one Daddy started?" Harper smiled. "Of course." Luna's voice was soft, drowsy. "I think that song is helping Daddy come back to life." Harper's heart twisted. "I think it's helping me too," she whispered. When Harper left that evening, she didn't take the elevator to her penthouse and pour herself a glass of wine. She went home, sat at her piano, and opened a blank page. She wrote the first line of a new melody, and beneath it, in cursive, for the girl with the perfect ear and the father learning to listen again. It started as a whisper, a link shared in a group chat, a grainy clip sent between interns. Then, a wildfire. By noon, the video had made its way to every floor of Lyra Records, from the cramped cubicles of accounting to the gleaming windows of the executive suite. The caption read, "When the janitor plays a duet with the CEO, and the piano remembers." And just beneath the caption, 3 unspoken words echoed through every comment: music love fire, and a final stinger: "Is this romance or resignation waiting to happen?" Harper Quinn stood in her office, the screen frozen mid-frame. The video was 38 seconds long. In it, she sat beside Elliot at the lobby's grand piano, her hands drifting over the keys as he layered a soft harmony underneath. Their eyes met briefly. There was no sound but the music, no words, just connection. The camera had been angled through the glass wall of the security booth. Unsteady, zoomed-in amateur yes, but the intimacy was undeniable. Jennifer, her assistant, stood beside her like a soldier in a storm. It's circulating through internal Slack threads, social media. Even Reddit has a thread. "I'm sorry, Harper. Someone must have leaked it from the overnight footage. The security team's investigating." Harper exhaled slowly. "How many views? Over 200,000. Just from private shares. The algorithm picked it up this morning. And comments?" Jennifer hesitated. "They're mixed. Some are supportive. Most are speculating. Office gossip. Power dynamics. You know how these things go." Harper turned away from the screen. "Do the board members know they've called 6 times? Richard left a message asking for a frank conversation this evening." Harper closed her eyes. Of course he did. She found Elliot in the staff stairwell 2 hours later, wiping down handrails with practiced efficiency. He didn't look up when she entered. "I was wondering when you'd come." Harper held out her phone. "It's everywhere." "I know. You knew someone recorded us, I found out this morning. Someone in payroll winked at me and said, 'Nice duet, maestro.' I thought he was having a stroke." Harper didn't smile. "This isn't funny." "No, it's not." She stepped closer, her voice low. "They're turning this into something it's not. Turning you into something you're not. They're saying you're using me, or I'm manipulating you, or that I'm a project you took on to fix your public image." He finally looked at her. "And what do you think it is?" Harper blinked. "I think it's real. Whatever this is, it's the most honest thing I've touched in years." Elliot studied her. "Then why do you look like you're already running from it?" Her voice cracked. "Because I know how this ends. Tell me. They'll drag my name, question my judgment, my leadership, everything I built, and you think I don't know how that feels?" His voice was calm but sharp now. "I gave up the only thing I was ever praised for. I vanished so my daughter could breathe. You think I don't know what it means to watch a life dissolve?" She looked away. "I didn't ask for this." "No," he said, "but you played for it. You showed up for it, and now you want to hide." "I'm trying to protect you," she snapped. "No," Elliot replied. "You're trying to protect your image, and you're using me as the reason to retreat." That landed like a slap. He didn't flinch. "Let me ask you something, Harper. When was the last time you stayed in something messy, something you couldn't script, couldn't schedule, couldn't control? Her mouth opened, then closed. That's what I thought. She stepped back, arms wrapped around herself like armor. You have no idea the pressure I'm under. You're right, he said. I just know what it feels like to be left standing when someone walks away. A beat. Then Harper whispered, Is that what you think I'll do? I don't think it, Elliot said. I see it. The next morning, headlines hit the trade sites. Power Ballad or Power Imbalance CEO Harper Quinn caught in intimate moment with Janitor. Leary Records. Faces backlash over workplace boundaries. Viral duet sparks. Ethics inquiry. Inside Lyra's headquarters, whispers followed Harper down every hallway. She didn't need to hear the words, she felt them. The board meeting was scheduled for 4:30 p.m. She entered the room 20 minutes early, sat at the head of the table, waited. One by one, they filed in, Richard Quinn, chairman of the board, and her late father's brother entering last. Harper, he said curtly, taking his seat. We need to address the optics. Of course. We'll issue a statement clarifying your relationship with Mr. Reed as non-romantic and outline our zero-tolerance policy moving forward. Harper looked up. It is romantic. Silence. I'm not going to lie to clean up your discomfort, she said. I sat at that piano because I felt something real. I'm not ashamed of it. Richard frowned. This could cost the company millions. Harper met his gaze. Then maybe we should ask why we built something so fragile that a single moment of humanity can shake it. A beat. You're making a mistake, Richard warned. No, she said. I'm choosing something else, for once. Later that evening, Harper stood outside the building. No press, no entourage, just herself alone under the city's gray sky. Her phone buzzed. A message from Elliot. We lost something today, didn't we? Or maybe we finally stopped pretending we never had it. She stared at the screen, then typed, I don't want to lose you. His reply came quickly. Then don't. But it wasn't that simple. Because when she knocked on his apartment door the next night, there was no answer. A neighbor said he'd packed a bag. Something about a trip to the hospital. Harper's chest tightened, and for the first time in years, the woman who'd built an empire ran. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and old fear. Harper hated hospitals, the flickering lights, the mechanical hush, the way people whispered like the air itself might break under pressure. She found Elliot in the pediatric wing room 312. The door was cracked. She paused before pushing it open. Inside, Elliot sat beside Luna's bed, one hand wrapped tightly around hers, the other covering his eyes. His shoulders rose and fell in shallow, shaky rhythm. Luna was pale, too pale. Oxygen tubes framed her face. The heart monitor beeped steadily but softer than it should. A stuffed bear sat tucked under her arm. Harper stepped in quietly. Elliot, he looked up. His face was hollowed raw. How did you know your neighbor? She said gently. You didn't answer my text. He blinked like he'd forgotten what a phone was. Sorry. She approached the bed, eyes on the little girl. How is she? Critical, he whispered. Attack hit harder than usual. Oxygen dropped fast. They had to intubate her before I could even process what was happening. Harper's heart clenched. Is she awake? She was, he said. She kept asking for the song. The one we were writing together. His voice cracked. I couldn't finish it, he whispered. I promised I would, but I couldn't. Harper took his hand. Then we'll finish it now. He looked at her, tears brimming but not falling. You think she'll hear us? I think love travels, Harper said. Even through glass and wires and beeping machines, especially then. They sat at Luna's bedside side by side, no piano, no keys, just two hands tapping the rhythm softly on her blanket, one melody, one harmony, half whispers of a lullaby still being born. And when Elliot finally sang, voice quiet, rusty from years of silence, Harper sang with him. The sky is dark, but not for long. The stars still hum. A silent song. You sleep, my light, while I will stay, to play the dawn into your day. Luna didn't open her eyes, but her small fingers twitched, just slightly. Harper felt it the tiniest press against her palm. She heard Harper's said voice breaking into a smile. She always does. A few hours later, the doctor entered, expression measured but kind. Her vitals are stabilizing, he said. The medication is helping. But this isn't sustainable long-term. She'll need more advanced treatment, a specialist team likely out of state. Elliot stood. How long do we have? A few weeks. Maybe less if another episode hits before her system recovers. You should prepare. The door closed. Silence swallowed the room again. Elliot leaned against the wall. I can't afford Boston. I can't even afford a second ER visit. Harper stepped forward. Then let me help. I can't ask you for that. You didn't ask, she said. I'm offering. He looked at her, pain flickering in every line of his face. Do you know what it feels like to have your dignity measured in invoices? She reached up, touched his cheek. Do you know what it feels like to have money and still feel useless? That stopped him. I've sat in boardrooms making million-dollar decisions while my soul begged for something real, she whispered. Don't rob me of the chance to finally give something that matters. A beat. Then Elliot pulled her into a fierce, silent embrace. Not romantic, not restrained, just human. Two people holding each other at the edges of fear. The next day, Harper cleared her schedule. Called every contact she had in pediatric cardiology. Donated anonymously to the hospital foundation to fast-track Luna's transfer. But she didn't just write checks. She sat beside Luna. Told her stories. Brought coloring books and noise-canceling headphones. Read her music notes like fairy tales. And slowly, room 312 stopped smelling like fear. It began to smell like hope. 3 days later, Luna was approved for transport. The specialist team in Boston would take her in within the week. Harper returned to Lyra Records that evening to sign a final document transferring her voting power. The board had forced her out. They called it a mutually agreed transition. She called it the price of honesty. As she packed her office, Jennifer entered quietly. You don't have to go like this. Yes, I do, Harper said. They built this tower without room for people like Elliot, or Luna, or even me, honestly. Jennifer hesitated, then handed her a folder. These came in the mail today, fan letters from people who watched the video. They weren't mocking, they were moved. They said you made them feel again. Harper smiled softly. Then maybe I finally did something worth the noise. She left the building that night with a box under one arm and Elliot's old composition folder under the other. The next time she saw him, they were standing outside the car that would take Luna to Boston. Luna looked stronger. Still small, still fighting, but her eyes were bright, her smile steady. Miss Harper, she said, tugging on her sleeve. Will you come visit me after I get my new heart? Harper knelt. I'll be there the day it starts to beat. Luna leaned in and whispered, Bring the music. Elliot stood by, watching it all, his eyes misted but his posture proud. Thank you, he said quietly. You're welcome, she replied, but I didn't save her. You did. Every day you showed up when it was hard. That's what love looks like. He looked at her. Really looked. You saved me. They stood there for a long time after the car pulled away. No rush, no words, just music humming between them without sound. That night, Harper sat at her piano alone. She pulled out a blank sheet. At the top, she wrote Finale, the song that never slept, and below it, for the girl who fought to breathe and the man who never stopped listening. The room was colder than she remembered. The boardroom table, 42 feet of walnut and polished ego, sat like a monument to control. Around it, the faces were familiar, but colder now, tightened by discomfort and whispers of scandal. Harper sat alone at the head, back straight, fingers interlaced, not as a CEO, but as a woman who had already let go. She had worn navy. No jewelry, no makeup, no mask. Because this wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. Richard Quinn cleared his throat, first seated across from her like a judge at sentencing. The optics haven't improved, he began. Despite your efforts to stay quiet, the narrative has taken on a life of its own. I'm aware, Harper said calmly. He nodded toward a legal packet on the table. We've drafted a mutual separation agreement. You step down without further noise. In return, we ensure your reputation stays intact, your severance remains whole, and the press gets a clean version of your exit. Someone else chimed in, Margot Lynn, VP of Marketing. We can spin this as your choice. A desire for personal growth, maybe even frame it as philanthropic. Say you're pursuing music outreach programs. Harper didn't blink. You want me to lie. We want to protect the company Richard corrected, and frankly, to protect you. Harper leaned forward. You want me to erase the truth because it makes you uncomfortable, because I did something human in a place built for machines, Because I sat at a piano and felt something real in front of someone who wasn't wearing a suit. Margot's voice sharpened. You're not being asked to apologize for feelings. You're being asked to take responsibility for the risk you introduced. There's no risk in loving people, Harper said, voice cutting clean through the room. The risk is in pretending you don't. Silence. Richard closed the folder with a snap. Then let's stop pretending. If you reject this agreement, we'll proceed with a vote of no confidence. You'll be removed with cause. That affects not just your severance, but your legacy. Harper exhaled slowly. I've carried this company through lawsuits, market crashes, and artist meltdowns. I've worked 18-hour days for years, built brands that outsold expectations, mentored interns who became vice presidents. And now, you want me gone because I loved someone you didn't see coming. Her voice lowered. Let me ask you something, Richard. When did we become so afraid of grace? He flinched. Margot looked away. Harper stood. I'm not going to sign your lie, and I'm not going to beg to stay. If being human costs me my seat at this table, then I'll build a better one. Somewhere, people like Elliot Reed don't have to disappear to survive. Somewhere, music still matters. She reached into her bag and placed a small envelope in front of Richard. What's this? He asked. A personal donation to the Lyra Foundation, Harper said. To fund music education for underprivileged kids. Name it after whoever you want, but don't let it go to waste. Then she turned to the rest of the room. I'm leaving not because I'm ashamed, but because I've remembered who I am. No one moved as she walked out. She didn't take her nameplate, didn't say goodbye, because some endings don't need punctuation, only purpose. She stood outside this building for a long while, watching her reflection in the mirrored glass. It looked nothing like the woman who'd first entered this tower 10 years ago. That woman had been hungry, ambitious, brilliant, and lonely. This one was awake. And as she stepped onto the sidewalk into the afternoon light, Harper Quinn didn't feel like she was falling. She felt like she was returning. That night, she found Elliot sitting on a park bench just past the hospital gardens, headphones around his neck, eyes on the horizon. She didn't speak right away, just sat beside him. After a while, he said, You're not wearing the armor today. I left it in a boardroom downtown, she replied. He glanced at her. What happened? I resigned. A long pause. Then he said, They'll regret it. No, Harper said, but I won't. He looked at her fully now. You're different. I remembered something she said. That the title next to your name means nothing if it costs you the music inside you. Elliot turned away. His voice, when it came, was low. I didn't want to be the reason you lost everything. You weren't, Harper replied. You were the reason I found it. He went still. I watched you fight for your daughter, she continued. Heard you play music you hadn't touched in years. Saw you rebuild your soul, note by note. And somewhere in that, I realized I wanted to play again too, not just piano. Life. A breeze passed between them. Then Elliot said quietly, She's going to Boston tomorrow. I know. She's scared. So are we, Harper said. But we do it anyway. That's what love does. He finally smiled. You really quit? Not quit, she said. Graduated. He laughed, and it felt like the first true exhale either of them had taken in weeks. Harper reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. What's this? He asked. An invitation. Elliot opened it. Inside, a handwritten card. A celebration of new beginnings. Featuring Elliot Reed live at Lincoln Chapel one night only proceeds to benefit the Luna Fund for Pediatric Music Therapy. He stared at it stunned. Harper, I haven't played for an audience in years. She met his eyes. Then let them meet you. He held the card like it was fragile. Sacred. Why me? Because people need to hear what healing sounds like. Elliot swallowed hard. What if I fail? She reached for his hand. Then fail in front of people who love you. That's the safest kind. They sat in silence after that. But it wasn't empty. It was filled with promise. And as the sun dipped low, Elliot whispered, Do you think she'll be okay? Harper squeezed his hand. I think she's got the strongest heart I've ever met, and it's just waiting for a melody worth growing into. The apartment was quiet, too quiet for a Saturday morning. Elliot stood in the doorway of his tiny kitchen staring at the folded piece of paper Luna had left on the counter. It wasn't her usual scribble on napkins or crayon trails across cereal boxes. This was different. It was a letter, carefully folded, addressed in shaky block letters. To Daddy from Luna, but serious this time. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. "Dear Daddy, if I don't wake up after Boston, don't be sad. I know I was your song, but you're mine too. So if I can't finish our song, I want you to promise. Promise you'll play it for me one day, not alone, but in front of people. Like Mommy used to say, where love can echo. Tell Miss Harper thank you for finding your music, and tell her I think she's pretty even when she's mad. P.S. I put something under the piano. It's for when you're ready. I love you more than marshmallows. Love, Luna, the bravest girl you ever met." Elliot sat down, the letter still in his hand, the air thick around him. His eyes drifted to the corner of the living room where his upright piano stood dusty and long silent but never unloved. He knelt beside it, pulled at the warped wood panel beneath the keys. Inside, tucked carefully in a jewelry box that used to belong to her mother, was a single brass key, and a sticky note. Use this when you feel like being loud again. A heart, a doodle of him at a piano, and a smiley sun drawn over the word loud. Elliot laughed through his tears. That key wasn't just a key, it was the spare to the chapel. The Lincoln Chapel was more rumor than venue. A tucked-away hall at the edge of the city park, once a sanctuary for lost souls and music students who couldn't afford Carnegie. It had been closed for years, then quietly reopened by a non-profit Harper had quietly funded under a different name. When Elliot arrived, he expected the space to be empty, but when he stepped inside, the air carried something waiting. The grand piano stood at center stage, its surface still gleaming despite the age of the room. But what stopped him wasn't the piano. It was the letter sitting on its bench. He recognized the handwriting before he even opened it. Harper. I didn't know how to fix what was broken between us. But maybe it doesn't need fixing, just music. Luna believes in echoes. She believes in the kind of love that ripples even after the sound is gone. So I booked the room. I lit the candles. I called in every string I've ever owed to make sure this place, this moment would be yours when you were ready. Play for her, Elliot. Play like she's listening. Because she is. And if by some miracle you play for me too, I'll be there. H. Elliot folded the letter slowly, then sat, and for a moment he simply stared at the keys. He'd played for record labels once, for concert halls, for applause and critics and dreams that now felt like another man's. But this would be the first time he played for his daughter. At 7:00 p.m. sharp, the chapel doors opened. It wasn't a concert. There were no tickets. Just people, dozens, then hundreds who'd seen the viral video, who'd heard whispers of a janitor with fingers that healed, a woman from the hospital, a nurse who had held Luna's hand during the worst of it, Jennifer from Lyra, the security guard who used to slip Elliot extra mints at night. Even Margot Lynn without the boardroom armor, and Harper, standing quietly in the back, no camera, no press, just presence. Elliot didn't speak when he stepped on stage. He didn't need to, because when his fingers touched the keys, the room exhaled, and the music that poured from him wasn't polished, wasn't perfect, but it was pure body. The song didn't have a name. It never needed one. But it carried every moment he'd lived, the hospital nights, the mop and bucket, the day Luna said her first word, the silence after his wife died, the look in Harper's eyes when she said, "You were the reason I found it." The room wept, not from sadness, but from truth. Midway through, Harper moved to the front row. She didn't cry, she listened. And Elliot, without looking up, whispered through the music, "This is for you too." When the final note faded, the room didn't applaud. It just stood still, as if no one wanted to disturb the holiness of that silence. Then, one by one, people placed small candles at the base of the stage. Dozens of flickering lights, each one an echo. Each one, Luna. Later, Harper sat beside Elliot on the empty stage. "Do you think she heard it?" he asked. Harper took his hand. "I think she was the one playing it through you." He nodded slowly. "I didn't think I had anything left." She leaned her head gently to his shoulder. "Turns out," she whispered, "you were never empty, just waiting." "Daddy," Luna whispered. "Can you play it again?" The song from the candles. Elliot looked up from her bedside, startled. She was awake. For the first time in days, her voice wasn't slurred by medication or swallowed by fatigue. Her eyes, still ringed in pale shadows, were clear and full of something he hadn't seen since she first fell ill. Hope. He stood his chair scraping against the hospital floor, but he didn't care. "Luna," he breathed, gripping her hand like it was a lifeline. She smiled faintly. "It was loud in my dreams. And warm." Elliot bent down, kissed her forehead, and for once didn't have to hide his tears. "You heard it." "I think I was it," she murmured. Across the room, Harper leaned against the wall watching them, her arms folded, eyes rimmed red from emotion and sleeplessness. "She woke up an hour after your performance," she said quietly. "The nurse said it was like her heart. Remembered how to fight." Elliot turned to Harper, his voice trembling. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," she said gently. "Just stay here with her." That night, Luna stayed awake longer than she had in months. She sipped broth, played gently with a teddy bear, and even convinced a nurse to let her color with a clipboard in bed. And all the while, Elliot stayed beside her humming that same unfinished lullaby. At one point, Luna looked up and said, "You didn't quit Daddy." He blinked. "Quit what music? Life? Me?" He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "I thought I did, but I was wrong." She grinned sleepily. Miss Harper was right. Love echoes, even in silence. A week later, Luna was transferred to the Boston Cardiac Center. Harper arranged everything logistics specialists and even a cozy temporary apartment nearby for Elliot to stay in during her recovery. It wasn't charity. It was investment. In love. In healing. In all the things spreadsheets could never measure. Elliot tried to repay her to protest, but Harper cut him off every time. "I've spent years buying silence," she said one night as they walked through the city. "Donating to causes just to quiet my guilt. But this, helping you. Helping her. This is the first time I've ever felt like I was building something worth hearing." He looked at her then, under the soft orange glow of a street lamp. "You know you're part of the melody now, right?" She smiled softly. "I was hoping you'd say that." The night before Luna's surgery, Harper joined Elliot and Luna for a quiet dinner in the apartment. It was just soup and grilled cheese, but to Luna it was fancy because they'd used cloth napkins. Midway through the meal, Luna turned to Harper and asked, "Do you love my dad?" Harper choked on her water. Elliot froze mid-bite. "Luna?" He gasped. "What?" she said innocently. "You look at each other like the movies, but real." Harper wiped her mouth and composed herself. "Well, your dad is very special." Luna nodded. "I know. He hides it, but he's basically magic." Elliot covered his face with both hands. "I'm officially mortified." Harper leaned forward. "And if I did love him," Luna shrugged, "then you should tell him, before his hair gets too gray." They all laughed deep, genuine belly laughter. The kind that doesn't just echo, it roots itself in your bones. And later that night, when Luna fell asleep curled against her dad's chest, Harper sat beside him on the sofa. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Elliot whispered, "She's not wrong." "About what?" "You should probably tell me before it's too late." Harper looked at him, eyes tired but alive. Then without drama or flair, she said, "I love you, Elliot Reed." He didn't flinch, didn't blink. He just leaned in and kissed her, softly, like he'd been waiting to come home. The next morning, Luna was prepped for surgery. The waiting room felt like purgatory white walls, sterile light the ticking of a wall clock that never moved fast enough. Elliot paced. Harper sat still, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. Hours passed. Then a door opened and the lead surgeon walked in. He looked tired, but he smiled. She made it. Elliot collapsed into a chair. Harper reached for his hand, tears falling freely. The doctor continued. She was a fighter. The moment we closed, her heart took the rhythm right away, like it had been waiting. Elliot laughed through sobs. She's always had a beat of her own. That night, Elliot visited the chapel again. This time, Harper was already there, waiting at the piano, fingers resting on the keys. He joined her without a word. Together they played. No audience, no cameras, just them, and the echoes of a girl with a heart strong enough to carry them all. The song they wrote that night would one day open music therapy centers across the country. It would be taught in schools, used in hospital wards, hummed by strangers. But it would always belong to three people: a janitor, a CEO, and the little girl who believed in echoes. The wind carried the scent of spring earthy clean, full of second chances. Beneath the blooming dogwood trees that lined the path toward the Lincoln Chapel, Luna Reed skipped along the cobblestones, her dress fluttering her laughter, rising like music into the morning air. She had a scar now, one that peeked out from beneath her collar like a quiet badge of courage. But she wore it like she wore her smile without shame. It didn't mark what she'd lost. It reminded her of what she had survived. "Careful," Elliot called out from behind her. "You're not that healed yet." Luna stopped, spun around with hands on her hips and grinned. "Daddy, you're the one who said scars are just proof we kept going." He chuckled. "Did I? You say a lot of smart things when you think I'm asleep." Harper walked beside Elliot, her hand in his. "She gets that from you." "No," Elliot replied, glancing at her. "She gets that from us." They approached the chapel doors together, the same doors where once Elliot had entered alone, afraid his music had died. Now he stood not as a janitor, not as a shadow of his former self, but as a man fully seen. A man who had loved, lost, broken, and rebuilt. And beside him the woman who had dared to believe he still had something worth hearing. Inside, the air buzzed with anticipation. The seats were filled not by celebrities or critics, but by nurses, teachers, janitors, librarians, single moms, and tired fathers. Ordinary people who had found something extraordinary in the story of a girl, a piano, and the man who played in silence until someone finally listened. At center stage, under a soft halo of warm light, sat the piano, polished, open, waiting. Harper knelt beside Luna in the front row. "You sure you remember the first part?" she asked gently. Luna beamed. "I practiced with Daddy every day." Harper smiled. "And if you get nervous, I'll just look at you and pretend you're a giant marshmallow." Harper laughed, covering her mouth. "Deal." Then Elliot stepped onto the stage, calm and steady. He leaned toward the microphone. "Tonight isn't about perfect notes," he said. "It's not about talent or technique. It's about what happens when we stop running from the parts of ourselves that hurt and start letting them sing." He gestured toward the wings. "Luna." The room held its breath. Luna emerged slowly. Her small figure illuminated as she walked to the bench. Elliot lifted her up, adjusted the sheet music, though they wouldn't be needing it, and sat beside her. Then, with one soft breath, they began to play. The melody started slow, gentle, almost hesitant. But then, like muscle memory infused with love, it bloomed. Each note built upon the last like bricks forming a home. It was the same lullaby Elliot had played that night in the hospital in the chapel, and in every quiet hour he thought he might lose her. But this time Luna played the first part, and when she reached the moment her hands weren't strong enough, she lifted her eyes to him and whispered, "Your turn." Elliot took over. His hands danced across the keys not as a performance, but as prayer. Then, just when the final note approached, he paused, turned to the crowd, and nodded once. The string quartet rose in the back. The children's choir stood. And suddenly, the room wasn't just watching a concert. They were inside it. The harmony swelled. Voices lifted. Some audience members cried. Some held hands. Some closed their eyes and simply listened. Because somehow, in that moment, everyone recognized the song. Not from memory, but from meaning. It was the sound of forgiveness, of hope resurrected, of hearts that had been broken mended and dared to beat louder. After the performance, no one rushed to leave. People lingered like they were afraid the magic might fade if they stepped outside. Luna, still clutching a single white lily someone had handed her, turned to her father. "Do you think Mommy heard us?" Elliot knelt to meet her eyes. "I think she wrote the bridge." Outside, Harper leaned against the chapel doors, watching Elliot with a soft, full gaze. When he finally reached her, she didn't speak. She just touched the corner of his mouth where a tear had dried. "I knew your silence wasn't empty," she whispered. He reached for her hand, brought it to his heart. "You filled it." She tilted her head. "So, what happens now?" Elliot looked around the chapel, the trees, the people still humming the melody. "I think we keep playing." In the weeks that followed, Elliot launched a foundation in Luna's name, The Song That Never Ends. Its mission to bring music therapy into underfunded hospitals, schools, and community centers across the country. Harper left the boardroom behind. She joined the foundation not as a CEO, but as a co-founder, a pianist, and someone who had finally remembered what real power sounded like. They didn't chase fame, or money, or applause. They built a life, full of small concerts in quiet rooms, Sunday pancakes, letters from children who said they felt heard for the first time. And every night before bed, Luna would say, "Play me the song, Daddy, the one that found me." And so he would, softly, lovingly, until she fell asleep, because some stories don't end, they echo, forever, and maybe that's what life is all about. Not the noise we make when we're seen, but the echoes we leave behind when we love deeply, even in silence. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this story from? Drop a comment and let us know, because your presence here means more than you think. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of someone you love, or simply gave you a reason to smile, today, please consider subscribing to the channel. There are many more stories waiting to be told. Stories that heal, stories that matter. Thank you for spending your precious time with us. Until the next story, stay kind, stay brave, and remember, sometimes the quietest people play the loudest songs. You just have to stop and listen.